Welcome back, everyone, to the O2 Property Podcast. This is episode 6.
Great to be back. Today, we're looking at some interesting movements in the Canberra property scene.
Yeah, specifically, are we seeing sellers offer bigger discounts lately? We've been looking at a report based on data from places like All Homes, CoreLogic.
REA as well. The goal really is to unpack what these numbers, these signals actually mean for you, whether you're buying, selling, or just, keeping tabs on the market.
Exactly. I'll be highlighting some key bits from the sources.
And I'll try to add a bit of context, sort of the so what behind the data.
Okay, let's jump in. Discounting trends.
Yeah.
What did the sources say about houses first?
Right. So the report mentioned vendor discounting for houses. It rose in April. Hit a 5-month high, actually.
A 5-month high. Sounds significant.
Well, yes and no. The report was quick to add context. Crucially, even with that rise, discounts are still pretty low, like among the lowest we've seen since 2021.
Ah, okay. So not panic stations. More like a slight adjustment from very low levels.
Exactly. It suggests sellers are still relatively confident, certainly compared to a few years back. The average discount, around 3.5% for houses in Canberra, according to this report.
3.5%. And how does that stack up?
It's actually lower than Sydney. The report mentions Sydney's average is closer to 4.7%. So Canberra sellers seem to have a bit more pricing power, relatively speaking.
Okay, 3.5%. So on an $800,000 house, maybe, that's like, what, $28,000 off?
Yeah, around that mark. It's a negotiation, a bit of give, but not necessarily huge slashes from the asking price on average.
Gotcha. Now, the sources point out the unit market is, well, it's doing something different.
Yeah, completely different trajectory here. For units, the report said discounting has actually dropped for 4 months straight.
Dropped. That seems odd, given the general talk of markets cooling a bit.
It does seem counterintuitive, but the analysis digs into it. Even with lower discounts being agreed upon, there's still underlying pressure on unit prices.
So less percentage off the asking price, but maybe the asking prices themselves reflect that pressure, or buyers are different.
Could be a mix of things. The report suggests asking prices might already be factoring in market conditions, or maybe unit buyers aren't negotiating as hard on the percentage right now. It's complex.
And the report mentioned future forecasts too, didn't it, for units?
Projections for 2025 suggest unit prices could potentially fall, maybe between -4% and -2% in Canberra.
Right. So the average discount for units is 3.8%, a touch higher than houses, strangely, but lower than other cities. But that's against a backdrop of potential price drops.
Exactly. So houses, slightly more discounting recently, but from a low base. Units, less discounting, but maybe more overall price pressure. It's definitely not one size fits all.
Really shows you need to look at the whole picture.
Yeah.
What about other indicators, like how long are properties taking to sell, days on market?
Good question. For houses, the report showed days on market, DOM, has been climbing, up for 5 months straight.
Which basically means houses are sitting around longer before selling.
Pretty much. Buyers maybe feel less rushed, taking more time, doing more homework, not the frantic pace of, say, 2021.
And units. Same trend.
Actually, units saw a slight dip in DOM in the very latest data point. But, and it's an important but, the report stresses sales are still slower than they were back in that really hot 2021 market. A small, recent improvement, but still longer waits overall compared to the peak.
Okay, so DOM generally trending up or staying elevated. What about the number of properties actually for sale? Listing volumes.
Yeah, the data indicates listings are increasing in Canberra, more properties hitting the market.
And more listings means?
More choice for buyers. Simple as that. If you're looking, you've got more options, maybe less competition for each specific place.
Which naturally gives buyers a bit more leverage in negotiations, right?
Absolutely. The report connects increased listings directly to buyers having more negotiating power. If one seller won't budge, there might be another option just down the road.
So if we try to piece together this sentiment from the report, discounting, DOM, listings, what's the overall feeling?
The general take seems to be that sellers are cautious, maybe a bit more flexible than peak market, but definitely not desperate. Canberra's market still looks relatively strong compared to, say, Sydney or Melbourne.
Makes sense. Not a crash, but definitely a shift. The balance moving maybe just slightly, but noticeably towards buyers.
Yeah, rebalancing seems like a good way to put it.
So what does all this mean for someone thinking about selling right now based on what the report suggests?
The key takeaway seems to be less about expecting big discounts and more about pricing strategy, getting the price right from the very start.
Because if you price too high in this market,
Exactly. With more listings and properties taking longer to sell, an initial price that's out of step with the market means you risk sitting there for longer, potentially needing price cuts later, which doesn't look great.
Right, better to meet the market up front to attract buyers quickly. Avoid that stale listing perception.
Precisely. If your property is lingering for ages, the market itself is probably telling you the price needs another look. It's direct feedback.
Now, to add some real-world flavor to these stats, we are super excited to welcome today's guest. He is someone who knows the Canberra market like no other, especially the inner north. Auctioneer and real estate agent Andrew White from Belle Property Canberra, known for his energy, insight, and negotiation finesse. Andrew's been helping clients navigate shifting markets with confidence for years. If there's anyone who knows how to spot a discount trend early, it's him. It's good to get that practical perspective.
Definitely. He's dealing with these buyer and seller dynamics every single day.
Welcome to our humble podcast, Andrew. My first question. Discounting for houses has hit a 5-month high, but we're still at some of the lowest levels since 2021. In your opinion, are sellers becoming more flexible on price again, or is this just smarter upfront pricing?
Nothing humble about it, guys. Thank you for having me. Coming to your question, it's actually a little bit of both. So we've obviously learned a lot throughout the COVID period and the post-COVID period. And with a new confidence entering the market due to the interest rate cuts and the election and I guess a more optimistic, confident outlook to the future, sellers have now trusted that if they do take action and adjust their price in a market that's saying that you need to sometimes, they're confident they'll get the sale. So therefore I feel like they are more confident in the agent's advice to do so if that's what's required. And the new properties that are coming to market have had a lot more education in the post-COVID pricing. So it allows you to get that price right at the beginning. We're not learning lessons in a declining market. It feels a lot more flat and flat, sustainable, I guess, intel allows sellers to make more informed decisions around pricing.
I'm with you. That's why it is so important to appoint an agent who brings with them the experience and local market intel.
You said it. If there is anything a seller should spend more time on than looking for homes, is interviewing agents. And then focusing on those buyer dynamics. Andrew, you work a lot in suburbs like Turner and Lyneham. With listings creeping up and days on market trending higher, are you seeing buyers push harder on negotiation, and how are sellers reacting?
Okay, so classic real estate 101 is buyers think that homes are worth a lot less than they are, and sellers think they're worth a lot more than they are. That has never changed since the beginning of time. So what's happening now is that the information point has become flatter. So with a declining market, the information that's available to both sellers and buyers is up to 6 months old. And of course, as markets improve, that data can be perceived to be a little bit more negative. So a lot of buyers are definitely trying to push harder on negotiations, looking at past trends. However, we're starting to see those buyers miss out on properties as confidence does return, and buyers the new to market who've been watching it more closely and not relying on old data are making conscious decisions in that regard. Sellers are reacting to the tougher negotiations well in general, especially the suburbs I work in. They're generally very highly educated and very pragmatic sellers. I'm very lucky to work those wonderful areas, and they do quite like the extra information being requested of them, as it does sometimes lead to a more solid negotiation with a win-win outcome.
I like the real estate 101 bit. So true. And I hear you when you say it's easier when the sellers are more pragmatic and open to data-backed suggestions.
And finally, the practical advice part. What advice would you give sellers who are preparing to list in the current market, especially when it comes to pricing strategy?
I firmly believe that pricing needs to be a fluent target. So what I would always suggest to my sellers is, whether it's an auction campaign or not, the first week we do not advertise a price guide. We allow the buyers to come and tell us what they think it's worth and give us feedback, so we can make an educated decision on our price guide the following week. I think this gives buyers a chance to look at a property, and they've looked at many, to give us their honest feedback, but also gives our sellers some of that that market feedback before we make decisions on what we actually price a property at. We also need to make sure we're moving it weekly. If in a private treaty situation, if a property's not selling, moving that price and adjusting to the market, sometimes it is up, if you can believe that, is very important in making sure that we are talking to our sellers every week about where we're priced in the market, what our competitors are doing, and what will get us the most traffic through the door so we can negotiate up.
Pricing must be a fluent target, and revisiting pricing on a weekly basis based on market response. That's really helpful advice, Andrew. You heard it here first on the O2 Property Podcast.
Okay, so looking at the main findings from the sources we've discussed, it feels like the message is, yes, Canberra's market is holding up relatively well.
Resilient compared to some other capitals.
But those signals rising DOM, more listings, they mean that getting your initial asking price right is just becoming super critical for sellers.
Absolutely essential. It's less about expecting fire sale discounts across the board and more about sellers needing to be realistic and strategic from day one to meet the current market.
Thank you for your time and insights, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in for this look at the Canberra market data. We hope it's given you some useful insights. If you found this episode helpful, don't forget to follow our show, share it with someone thinking about making a move, and check out our earlier episodes. This is the O2 Property Podcast. I'm Matt Taylor.
And I am Ellie Hart, and we'll see you next week.